Hello, welcome to RC Video Reviews. Today I'm putting together my FPVWRA Spec wing from Defiant Wings. Yeah, I thought since I have to put this thing together that I might just spend a little time doing it on camera so you guys could get a look at the process that I'm going to go through. And I'm going to start out right away by putting a piece of paper down. I've got my two main wing cores ready to glue together, and notice that I left them in the blanks. The reason I did that is because you can see this is an airfoil top and bottom, and rather than set it on the table and try and get it lined up and get the twist right, by leaving it in the blanks, I've got a perfectly square surface to work from. So I'm just going to leave them in the blanks, and I'll slide the wing out just a little bit so that I can see what's going on. But now I've got a nice firm, grippy surface that I can use to press down and squish and hold things together. So before I start gluing, I'm going to do one final alignment to make sure everything looks good. And it does. So now I'm just going to get out my glue, and I checked the Defiant instructions, and they say for glue you can use Welder's contact adhesive, Goop, E6000, or white Gorilla Glue. This Gorilla contact adhesive clear grip is equivalent to E6000, so that's what I'm using. Okay, if you've never used this type of contact cement before, what I like to do is get it on the surface where I'm going to be doing my work. Just kind of spread it out and get it on there nice, and it doesn't necessarily have to be thickly applied, just kind of lay it in there and make sure you go all the way to the tip. Make sure that leading edge has got a good amount of glue, so that gives a good seal up front, and just kind of flatten it out. And then once you get it flattened out, I like to lay them down and just kind of touch the halves together and just kind of touch them and remove them. There you go, just touch and pull it off there and just kind of transfer some of that glue, and just make sure both sides have a good reasonable amount of contact adhesive. Okay, and just let it air dry for a couple minutes. So that's the real trick to this stuff, is just let it sit. Give it about 2 minutes. Hey, if you like the work I do here on RC Video Reviews, please consider joining me on Patreon. For about the price of a cup of coffee, you can help me keep making videos just like this one. If you'd like to help out, there's a link in the description and on your screen. Okay, after 2 minutes has gone by, you can go ahead and join the two parts together. Make sure you get them lined up well and give them a good squeeze. You don't want to squeeze it so much that you deform the parts, but you definitely want those halves to come together. And see, this is why I say use the blocks, because look what I'm able to do here. I've got a really good surface to grip on. The foam is doing a great job of holding onto the wing core, so my hand's not slipping off. It's just a really good technique to kind of hold things together while you glue and wait for that glue to set up. It also makes sure that I don't have any torque or twist in my airfoil. Well, let's give it a little test and see how that does. Oh yeah, that's on there. I mean, I'm not going to try and yank it apart, but that's definitely on there. Okay, while that sets up, I'm going to move my overflow paper down to the left-hand wing tip, and I'm going to move my left blank up just past center. There we go. So now I have the left side of the wing exposed, and I'll do the same thing. Going to get a nice little layer of glue added to this surface, spread it around, make sure to get that trailing edge, make sure to get some on that leading edge. Definitely want to make sure you have a good bond on the edges of the wing. I'm going to touch it to the main section of the wing, and just kind of same thing as we did last time, just on and off. You don't want to pull the glue back down here on the bottom, because that's where your elevator goes. So just touch it on and off a couple of times just like that, and then let it air dry. Just take it apart and let it sit there for about 2 minutes. And I'm going to check my main join just to make sure everything is still level there and not offset or coming apart or anything. Oh yeah, that looks good. While that's drying, I'll do the same thing on the right wing tip. I just want it smeared in there real nice, good full coverage. Okay, now I'll go over to the right side and make contact over here as well. All right, that looks good. I'm going to come back to the left wingtip and glue that one on. Yeah, this is definitely the way to do it, because by doing it this way, I know that this wing is flat. And I can put a good amount of pressure keeping those two surfaces together while that contact adhesive tacks up. All right, left side's done. Now I can get the right side, and I want that blank in there all the way. I want that level. There we go, that's better. All right, now that I've got a pretty good tack on my wing cords, I'm going to separate these halves because I'm going to use this as a platter to kind of hold the wing in place while I do things like glue in my spars. So just separate those two. Just cut that wing blank right down the middle. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's just like a, it's a jig. That's what I'm using it for, just a jig. All right, next is to lay in the spars, and the leading edge spar goes 3/4 of an inch back from the leading edge, so we'll start with that one. And all I did there was I'm just taking the spar, the tip, and putting a little pressure on it and helping it relax that seam where I'm going to put this spar in. Now that I'm comfortable that spar fits in there, I'm going to go ahead and put a bead of my Gorilla Glue in there to hold it in. And this will get the same treatment as the wing panels. I'll put it in there and get some glue on it. I'll spin it around a little bit, or move it around just to make sure that spar is coated. And then once I have a good coat of glue on that spar, I'm going to pop it out and let the air at it for just a few minutes, let it dry, and then we'll put it in there for good. While that's drying, I'm going to go ahead and go to the other side and relax the foam over there. Okay, that's long enough. I'm going to drop this spar in, get it right up to that center line. This is also pretty much the last chance you have to make sure everything is nice and compressed the way you want it. So make sure it's in there, because now it's going to start getting rigid. I can see a little bit of separation right here, so just work on that a little bit. Okay, while that dries, I'm going to glue in the other side. Okay, the next spar is 6 inches down from the leading edge. All right, the front end just was not staying pinched together, so I just put a little tape around the tip to kind of help convince it to stay put while that glue cures up. It's not going to matter too much in the end because I've got a camera mount that's going to be in there, so that whole section gets cut out anyway. But kind of like to make sure things are straight and bonded where they're supposed to be, so a little extra effort on that part. Okay, let's get back to this crossbar. So 6 inches down from the leading edge. Now, the thing that's a challenge about that is it's a swept wing, so you don't have an equidistant point on the other sides to measure, and they don't give a measure from the back of the wing. So you're kind of left to your own devices to make sure you have it straight. Yep, you're on your own. But here's how I'm going to do that. I'm going to measure from the seam to the ruler. 148 mil. Okay, now we'll see how we are on this side. Wow, pretty close. Also 148 mil. That's good enough for me. All right, that's the crossbar. The next one is the bottom spar going along the bottom edge. So that one is 1 inch from the trailing edge of the elevon pocket. I'm going to put a little tape on this one just to hold this tight as well. I may as well do the same on the other side. So the aft spar runs 1 inch up from the trailing edge all the way to that crossbar we just installed. All right, we're down to the last spar for this side of the wing, and this is called a stitcher spar, and they want that one up 1/2 of an inch from the most forward portion of the trailing edge of the wing. So 1/2 an inch is right there. And they say this is for motor reinforcement. So 1/2 an inch, and then we go to both tips out here. So I'll have to do the same trick where I'll measure from the trailing edge to the straight edge to make sure I've got this straight. All right, we'll let that one dry for a few minutes, then the spars will be done on this side of the wing. Okay, there's the first half with all the spars installed. I'm going to set this down and just leave it flat and let it dry for a while, and that way I'll be able to work on the other side without fear of having things separate or deform. So that'll be it. That's the first half of the wing assembly, and there'll be a part 2 coming up. As you can see, I've got a couple of racing stripes painted on. I got a little bit of overspray in the middle, darn it, oh well. And I'm getting ready to cut in my battery tray. So I put a couple of marks in for where the 2200 3-cell sits, and they give this battery tray, they call it a battery floor, but it's quite a bit bigger than the battery or the markings that I've cut out for the battery. So I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to work that in yet, but I would like to work it in. Another thing is that I had a soldering gun, and I use one of these cutters normally to cut out foam, but my soldering gun stopped working. So I'm going to use my soldering iron, and I dug out an old heavy tip that I'll use to cut out my foam for my battery. So I'm just going to start by cutting lines in and getting this area for the battery tray hollowed out. I do know the battery is going to go right up here up front, and as you can see, a soldering iron makes very quick work of things when it comes to EPO or EPP foam, and EPO for that matter. Get a little hung up in the glue, but it's really not hard once you have a soldering iron hot enough to cut through this stuff. Just to use this for making your compartments. And it's a lot easier than the other methods. There are other ways you can do this, including using a hobby knife and then cross hatching it and pulling it out. And that does work, but it just takes a lot more work. So if you have an old tip on a soldering iron you can use, I definitely recommend that. I almost wonder if this battery floor, if the intention for this was to flip it over on the bottom and trace around it and glue it in. So that's kind of what they said in the instructions, but it didn't make a lot of sense to me. They said to trace around it and glue it in, but it definitely cuts across these spars. I almost kind of think that if I'm going to use this, what I ought to do is cut these corners off. Okay, so I've got the battery floor in, I've got the battery bay cut out. Next thing I'm going to do, the next thing I want to do is open up a little compartment back here for wiring, and I'm going to put a lid, a 3D printed lid right here on the back. So I want the battery laying flush. I'll strap that down with Velcro, and I want a compartment back here for my VTX and maybe my ESC. So that's the next thing I need to do, is just clear out a little space in here for my equipment. Okay, I'm pretty well done cutting on the wing. The one thing I'll point out on these ailerons before you install them is notice that one of the edges is at a perfect right angle, and that's the bottom. So the top slopes toward the trailing edge of the top of the wing. So make sure you have that right before you start cutting out your elevons. I don't mind cutting these a little bit long to start with, because you can always sand them down even when they're on the plane to get them where you want them to be. So it's better to cut them a little long and be able to sand it back than to cut them too short. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Remember, the right angle goes toward the deck. The one that leans forward goes on the top part of the wing. Don't forget that. Perfect. Okay, the main thing I'm looking for when I start covering it is that I want the back end to be able to completely come down and past my elevons, because I'm going to wrap it around and use the laminate as the hinge. And I also know I'll be cutting some of my nose off, so I'm going to separate the two halves for the laminate. I'm going to cover the lower half of the wing so I can make sure I get my elevons fully covered, and then I'll worry about the top after I cut out the camera mount up front. Now with this laminate, you want to make sure you have the shiny side up. You don't want to have the matte side up. That's the glue. So I'm just going to start in the center, and I have my iron set really low. It's just a little above 1. It's very low. So just like all other shrink coverings, you start from the middle and work your way out. All right, now all I'm going to do is slip my laminate right here along the line for the elevon. And I'm going to place the elevon up against the airframe. And I'm going to hold it up there nice and tight and use the laminate for leverage. And I'm going to go ahead and iron that right on that elevon right there. Okay, so now I've got that ironed on that side. I'm going to flip it over and then flip the elevon up, and I'm going to continue wrapping it around. And then all the way around the back edge with the elevon completely up, because I don't want my laminate binding up my control surface. The next thing to do is to trim the back side and then connect the two, because the laminate sticks really well to laminate. So I'm just going to trim this up back here a little bit, take this off and just trim it a little bit to get rid of the excess. And then get this to lay down. And then once that's laid down, then I can finish pulling this nice and tight. And once you get that on the rest of the laminate, it really seals up good. Okay, and there's my elevon surface. I only have a couple degrees of down, but that's all you need on this. It actually goes the full mechanical distance, so it's a nice, good, clean, tight hinge with no air gap in there at all. Very clean. Now I'm going to get a razor out now and just trim the edge off. It's good to have the support for these trailing edges, because that gives you a good firm surface to press this laminate down on. So that really helps out a lot, having that blank under there to help support that trailing edge. Okay, I wound up on my iron at about 2.5. And that seems to be getting this laminate to hold on to the foam really well, and I don't see any burn marks or any adverse conditions on the laminate, so I'd say that looks good on this particular brand of iron. The port side looks pretty good. Now I can go to work on the starboard side. Okay, same deal on this one. I'm going to put it back on the flat part of the table so I can get it lined up correctly, but the same deal. We're just going to take the elevon and hold it up against the airframe nice and tight. Get that up against that airframe. Then I'm going to seal it. Oh, I got to cut it first. Yeah, definitely want to do that. So just go down the seam here. Yeah, just like last time, we'll fold the elevon up and then pull the material down back over the underside of the elevon. We'll iron it just like on the last one. And with the elevon still pulled all the way over the top of the wing, we'll just continue pulling the material down to finish off the hinge. And just like before, I'm going to pull the bottom forward. Trim it. And we'll pull that top nice and tight. And iron that down. And once laminate gets a hold of another sheet of laminate and you iron it, it gets really strong. All right, that should give us a nice pliable hinge. I'm just going to trim the rest of this excess off the edge. Okay, that's the top of the wing covered. Now I'm going to finish trimming this, and I'll make a few relief cuts right here in the center. In fact, I'll just go ahead and do that now because the motor's going to go there. So I'll just make a relief cut here, right in the center. And then I want to leave a little material to wrap around because I'm going to put layers on the bottom, and I want there to be material for the bottom laminate to get a hold of. So we'll just trim. I'm leaving about an inch, maybe an inch and a half. There we go. I'm also going to clear off the section over the stabilizer. We don't want any more modification of that. That's good the way it sits. Okay, that's the top half. So now that that's done, I'm just going to put my supports underneath, and I'm going to go around the whole thing one more time just to kind of seal things down a little bit, take care of any loose ends. I'm just looking for areas where it didn't quite seal correctly, or where I see maybe a wrinkle. And we're going to just clean those things up a little bit. Okay, there's the top layer covered. I'm going to repeat the process on the bottom. Now when I trim this, I'm going to trim this on the top half of the wing because I want the overlap. I want it to be able to grab onto the top half of the wing and kind of create that shingle effect. I've brought the leading edge from the bottom around the top, and I'm just using that to help seal everything together. All right, that's good enough for now. I need to trim off some of this excess because that's pretty challenging to work with it like that. Okay, the starboard side's done. Now I'm going to start working on the port side, bottom. Same thing, just run it right down the center. Get that to stick. Now I'm not re-ironing to my hinge or my control surface. That's already been done. I'm just stopping at the edge. Again, we want to pull this nice and tight up here and give that battery bay some extra, that battery tray some extra support. I think this time before going around to the top of the wing, I'm going to go ahead and trim some of this excess off the bottom just to make my life a little bit easier while I'm handling the wing. And I realize this is off frame, but all I'm doing over here on the wingtip is just cutting off the extra off the wingtip. Okay, with my excess trimmed, I'm going to pull, just like on the other side, I'm just going to pull it around the top and seal it down and give myself that real good bite, because laminate really sticks well to itself when it's hot. So getting it on this leading edge around the top like this just really kind of seals the deal. Okay, now it's just time to trim that excess off and we'll finish sealing up the top. You don't have to have a perfectly straight line, because when you get this stuff ironed down, you cannot see the seams. It's not like other materials. When you get this down there, the seams are hidden. It blends really well into itself. So you don't have to be too particular about that. Okay, now that I have the wrap completely finished, now I'm just going to go back around and just shrink it. I'm just going to iron it down and make sure it's good and affixed to the wing everywhere. Including my battery floor down there. Okay, that's the wing covered. Remember, I have a little bit of work to do up on the top, but I have to cut my camera pod out first. I'm not going to worry about covering that until the camera pod is installed. I'll take care of it then. And then there's a little bit of cover here for where my equipment tray is. That'll all come off. And I've got a couple of holes to cut out for my servos and my servo runs. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And rather than cleanly cutting the material around the servo opening, I'm just going to cut relief slots in here, and then I'm going to lay the servo material down into the gap, into the cavity, and use my iron to seal it down. That'll just help keep the material from peeling up as easy because it doesn't have an edge or any other laminate to bind onto. So by just kind of sealing it down there into the cavity, it'll help prevent the edges right here around the opening from coming up. Well, I'm glad I had a stash because the stock screws don't work with this motor mount. They're not long enough. I went through my stash of screws and I found an M3 by 12, and that looks to be good enough to do the job. So the 3D printed motor mount is just a little too thick for the stock little tiny screws that come with it. They don't bite. They do not get any purchase on the mounting holes on the motor at all. So you are definitely going to need an alternative mounting screw. M3 by 12, that works. Nope. M3x8. M3x12 is too long. I just checked it, and the M3x12 goes all the way down and touches the metal. So you need an M3x8. Yeah, that's perfect. There's the one you need, the M3x8, in order for the stock 3D printed motor mount to work with the T-motor. The stock screws are just too short. They are not getting a bite on the back of that motor. That would have been a nice thing to include, because I mean, it's not like there are a lot of different motor options here. And I think they probably know that the stock screws that come with the T-motor, they're not going to do the job. Okay. There we go, we're in business. All right guys, I think I'm gonna call that a stopping point, because all that's really left to do at this point is mount the camera in the VTX and mount my receiver and set up the plane, and that's it. I think we can call that a completion. This is close enough now where there's nothing that I can really add to the conversation with any more video footage. You know, the rest of it is just making the plane work. So connecting the motor and the ESC. I'll put in some Velcro straps for my little cover here. I might even print a little floor to go down there just to make it look a little neater. But I really like the way my gear cover worked out, and look at all the ventilation I've got in there. So nice and clean arrangement there. And one other thing I need to do is install the winglets. And again, very easy to do. You just kind of line it up on the edge and center it and glue them on. And I run a little bit of fiber tape to help hold them on. So real simple. There's nothing really value added in terms of filming that. Well, I've got about an hour left to work on this thing, and it'll be ready for the maiden. So I'll get that video done just as soon as I can. I'd say overall the plane went together really well. I think it looks kind of cool. Very aggressive little wing. It's that strong EPP foam, so I think it's going to hold up very well. I hope you guys enjoyed the content. If you did and you're not already a subscriber, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you know when new material hits the channel. Check out my affiliate links in the description. That's all I've got for today. Take it easy.